kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiging sa sikatanan, alam ng puso sa libig ko'y buhay, upang inilang buweka ng pag-ibig sa manlulupin. Kita pasisitin sa nagtatapulong sa simulan sa langit ng wagang ay pinakasilaw sa pagkayang ginamahal. Kamusta lang matawag ko'y natin ay managiging ang ituloy na parang niya kailan ang kanyang magiging luman ang araw na warhan at magsinta ko'y naging sa akin mo. Ang ligaya naman ay marami at mamatay ng dahil sa'yo. Simula noon hanggang ngayon, isang naging lalo. Magkaisaan man mundo, naiingan ay marunong. Tayong nasa hamon ng dagat, niyang sa malalim na umalang. Pinako sa puso at paniniwala, ang himawang para sa kawalan. At sa mo'y nagumpay, mula na bawis sugo at buhay, kapayapaan na naungan ay ating ang nakamtan. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, pagpalay pa sa mundo. Magsamor, lagi kang mamahalin, walang pinigil sa damdamin, mga pangako'y tutuparin. Habang buhay kami sa'yo'y magbabantay, mananatili sa puso't isipan. Ang lahat tumutin ay nagbuwis ng buhay, nasa piling ng may kapal. Ang samoy nagumpay, mula na bawis sugo at buhay, kapayapaan na naungan ay ating ang nakamtan. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, pagpalay sa mundo. Okay, may sound. Okay, check-in time natin ngayon para kaalaman po ng nakikinig sa atin, medyo magaga. 21 minutos po, pasado alas 6. Ang kalendaryo natin, 12 na po. Okay, araw ng Biyernes. Okay, buwan ng Enero, 2024 mga suki, mga kababayan, no? Okay, meron tayo na mga madaling araw po ito binigay sa atin, no? Okay, meron na parang impasse. Senyales po ay kung itong okay po ang kabilang panig, no? Okay, kung okay po ang kabilang panig, itong side po ng Israeli government, mga suki, no? Okay, binigay po ng CNN International. Ang swerte itong media, mga kababayan, nakakuha ng contact, no? Ang nakuha niya contact, okay, sa mga itong mga handling po ng mga itong handling po ng mga hostages, no? Meron pa kasi 129 hostage po ay natira po diyan, mga kababayan, no? Okay. Si Basim Naim po ang contact po ng isang tagapamahayag, okay, taga CNN. Okay, break natin ang impasse ito. Okay, baka ito ng window. Okay, puwang. Okay, o kaya window for negotiation, mga suki, no? Swerte itong taga CNN, mga kababayan, no? Okay. So, 3 beses marinig ko itong usapan po. Okay, pamagitan po ng contact CP, mga kababayan, cellphone. O swerte itong si, okay, sino kaya ang, wala nakalagay dito ang kanyang pangalan, no? Okay, ayon po rito, 2 American hostages released by Hamas, no? So, pakinggan natin, makinig kayo dito sa breaking impasse ito ng isang journalist, broadcast journalist po taga CNN, no? Okay, CNN reporter is negotiating for America, mga kababayan, no? Pakinggan natin. Para sabay-sabay tayo ay malaman ito, mga suki, mga kababayan, no? Okay, pakinggan natin. Kayo na po makinig. Ayan.
Israeli civilians?
Including the Israel.
I'm sorry. Can I just clarify this? You say you're willing to release all of the civilians, including the Israeli nationals, if there is a stopping?
Including the Israeli civilians and all the foreigners.
Do you want the airstrikes to stop? Is that the condition?
To stop the aggression, how can we technically, logistically, it is impossible to do it.
So that our viewers might hear that and say that this offer doesn't mean anything. That if you're not willing to carry it out, then it doesn't mean anything.
How? Well, if you stop the aggression, it can be implemented over the next hour. We are ready to release all the civilians, including the foreigners.
All of the civilians, including the Israeli civilians?
Yes, including the Israel.
I'm sorry. Can I just clarify this? You say you're willing to release all of the civilians, including the Israeli nationals, if there is a stopping?
Including the Israeli civilians and all the foreigners.
Do you want the airstrikes to stop? Is that the condition?
To stop the aggression, how can we technically, logistically, it is impossible to do it.
So that our viewers might hear that and say that this offer doesn't mean anything. That if you're not willing to carry it out, then it doesn't mean anything.
Well, if you stop the aggression, it can be implemented over the next hour. We are ready to release all the civilians, including the foreigners.
All of the civilians, including the Israeli civilians?
Yes, including the Israel.
I'm sorry. Can I just clarify this? You say you're willing to release all of the civilians, including the Israeli nationals, if there is a stopping?
Including the Israeli civilians and all the foreigners.
Do you want the airstrikes to stop? Is that the condition?
To stop the aggression, how can we technically, logistically, it is impossible to do it.
So that our viewers might hear that and say that this offer doesn't mean anything. That if you're not willing to carry it out, then it doesn't mean anything.
How? Well, if you stop the aggression, it can be implemented over the next hour. We are ready to release all the civilians, including the foreigners.
All of the civilians, including the Israeli civilians?
Yes, including the Israel.
I'm sorry. Can I just clarify this? You say you're willing to release all of the civilians, including the Israeli nationals, if there is a stopping?
Including the Israeli civilians and all the foreigners.
Do you want the airstrikes to stop? Is that
Okay, klaro po ang sinasabi po ni Bassem. Okay, ang maghawak po ng hostages. Okay, dyan po sa bansang, sa lugar po ng Hamas territory, no? Eh, siyempre hindi natin alam. Okay, itong swerte itong journalist mga kababayan, no? Itong hindi man sinabi rito kung sinong pangalan niya, basta taga CNN reporter mga kasuki, no? Napakaswerte niya. Okay, na-break niya ang impasse. Okay, senyales po na magkaroon po ng kalutasan ng problema ito, no? Okay, na depende na yan. Okay, sa kabilang panig, basta yon po sa panig ng Hamas militant mga kababayan, no? Maghawak ng 129 pa nating hostages. Sinabi po ng Israeli government, okay, mismo po si Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, wala na raw, naubos na raw yung mga hostages. So, sinungaling pa rin mga suki mga kababayan, no? It's a lie. Okay, so, pinaka-latest itong na-obtain natin na pinagkatiwalaan tayo, okay, ng mga international cable mga suki mga kababayan, no? Ayan, so, okay, kung di nyo alam, matagal na po ang ugnayan natin, link natin po sa international community, no? Kahit ganito lang studio ko, matagal na po mga suki, no? Okay, marami ng Secretary General ay dumaan po sa UN mga suki mga kababayan, no? So hanggang ngayon kay Antonio Guterres, ganun din, meron din na hindi rin cut ang ugnayan natin, no? Okay, so ulitin natin ito, no? Okay, para baka magkaroon po ng impasse. Breaking itong ginawa po ng isang kapwa natin tagapamahayag, no? Taga CNN International. Okay.
the condition?
To stop the aggression, how can we technically, logistically, it is impossible to do it.
So that our viewers might hear that and say that this offer doesn't mean anything. And if you're not willing to carry it out, then it doesn't mean anything.
How? Well, if you stop the aggression, it can be implemented over the next hour. We are ready to release all the civilians, including the foreigners.
All of the civilians, including the Israeli civilians?
Klaro po mga suki, no? Klaro, very clear.
Including the Israel.
I'm sorry. Can I just clarify this? You say you're willing to release all of the civilians, including the Israeli nationals, if there is a stopping?
Including the Israeli civilians and all the foreigners.
Klaro
You
po,
want
klaro,
the
no?
airstrikes to stop? Is that the condition?
To stop the aggression, how can we technically, logistically, it is impossible to do it.
So that our viewers might hear that and say that this offer doesn't mean anything. That if you're not willing to carry it out, then it doesn't mean anything.
How? Well, if you stop the aggression, it can be implemented over the next hour. We are ready to release all the civilians, including the foreigners.
All of the civilians, including the Israeli civilians?
Yes, including the Israel.
I'm sorry. Can I just clarify this? You say you're willing to release all of the civilians, including the Israeli nationals, if there is a stopping?
Including the Israeli civilians and all the foreigners.
Do you want the airstrikes to stop? Is that the condition?
Okay.
Stop the aggression, how can we?
Okay, kinaklarify po ng pinapaliwanag po, kinaklarify po ng itong reporter field reporter po ng CNN, no? Okay, kung kasama ba yung itong civilian po ng Israeli. Kasama po mga kababayan, na. Okay. So I advise if anybody can hear, okay, from the territory of Gaza, okay, do not use that phone anymore, no? Okay, baka matrace Okay, baka ma-locate kayo sa mga pamagitan po ng Google location mga suki, no? So, Basim Naim, please do not use that gadget. You look for another gadget, Mr. Mr. Basim Naim, no? Para hindi ma-locate po kung saan sila mga suki, no? Yan ang mga communication natin. Okay, alam po ng Google. Alam po ng Google location kung saan ka tumawag, kung saan ang location mo, kung saan ka nakatayo. Pati loob ng bahay mo, makuha po ng Google location mga suki, no? Pasok sa bahay mo, ang mga may mga gadget ka. Okay, pati, halimbawa ako ngayon, nasa studio. Kaya po ng Google location yan, malocate ako kung saan ang area ko, no? So, I advise, Basim Naim, do not use that gadget anymore, no? Okay, you have to buy another gadget. Ganon po katindi po ang mga communication, hinahawakan natin. Okay, kung hindi nyo alam, ganon po mga suki. Lalo na po mga ganon mga usapan po napakasensitibo mga suki, no? So, Mr. Basim Naim, please do not use that gadget, no? Ayan. You look for another gadget. Ganon po katindi po ang itong advancement po ng communication natin, no? Malukit ka kahit saan ka. Okay, sa pamamagitan po ng Google location, no? Google Map location. Ayan. Okay, mga suki, mga kababayan, kaya sinabi ko hindi po metal-metal. Okay, ang inyong abang lingkod mga suki, no? Okay, hindi po metal-metal. Sorry po, hindi metal-metal, no? Ayan. Okay, mga suki, mga kababayan. Ayan. Okay, meron puwang, no? Meron window of para sa kapayapaan mga suki, no? Okay, kung seryoso po itong Israeli government, may puwang po mga suki, no? Okay, meron window, may pintuan para po magkasundo na po mga kababayan, no? Okay, kasi hinahain na po ang demanda po ng South Africa. Yung pinarinig ko kagabi, okay, ng South Africa, mga abogado, mga lawyer, mga judge, laban po sa Israeli, itong lalo na po kay Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, at saka si Yoav Galan. Okay, lahat na. Yung tinatawag po war cabinet po ng war cabinet po ng Israeli government, pati parang complicit po ang US government itong si Joe Biden mga suki, no? At saka mga pati si Anthony Blinken mga suki, mga kabad. So malaking pressure po itong nangyayari po mga suki, no? Okay, tinatawag po ng geopolitics. Ayan. So, pinahil po na kahapon ay mag-hearing ata sila, ng South African government, pamagitan po ng mga judge nila, no? Kung may panahon pa, parinig natin uli po ang nangyari po pag-file ng kaso yan mga suki, mga kababayan, no? So, saan pinahil? Okay, sa International Criminal Court mga suki, no? Okay, saan ba yan? Sa Hague? Okay? Alamin pa natin mga suki, no? So, yan po ay ang impasse. Okay, nakuha na obtain natin. Okay, sa ating ADLSNTV International. Okay? Na magtiwala po na binigyan tayo ng ganyan mga suki, mga kababayan, no? Salamat. Thank you. Okay, dahil matagal na tayo engaged po dito sa global conflict mga suki, no? Okay, medyo bata-bata pa ako. Okay, hanggang ngayon, matanda na. Hindi tayo bumitaw po diyan sa global conflicts, mga geopolitics, mga suki, mga kababayan. Kaya nga sabi ko, Ang inyong abang lingkod, hindi po mital-mital mga kababayan, no? Okay, nulit-ulit ko, hindi mital-mital mga suki. Ayan. So, meron tayong ano? Okay, parang positive na magkaroon po ng usapan. Okay, pag i-release itong 129 na tira po ng hostages mga suki. May dalawa na, 127 na lang, no? Kasi may dalawang citizen ng Amerika partial release po ng itong grupo ng Hamas mga suki, no? So again, okay, Mr. Bassem Naim, do not use anymore that gadget, no? Baka mapunpiryan naman kayo. Okay, alam mo na ang katraidoran po ng mundo mga suki, no? Okay, traidor. Okay, bombahan kayo, wala na kayo mga suki mga kababayan, no? Sa pamagitan ng gadget. Location ng kung saan kayo lugar. So, iyon po ang advice natin sa kanila para tuloy-tuloy po ang usapan pong kapayapaan. No? Ayan. Okay, mga kababayan. Huwag kayo alis. No? Meron pa tayong titingnan kung makuha pa natin ito. No? Okay. Okay, break muna tayo and then balikan natin ang ibang balita, no? Okay. Ayan. Okay, court po ng judges at the International Court of Justice. Hindi ko mabasa. Napakalit naman itong okay. Hindi ko na mabasa mga suki, no? Okay. Okay, ang presidente po ng itong mga judges ng International Criminal Court. Okay, ang president ay si sino to? Danog Huy. Okay, Danog Huy. Okay. Ang vice president po mga kababayan, napakalit naman ito, no? Ang vice president ay sino ito? Kebagian. Sebagian, no? Kebagian o Sebagian? Okay. Hindi halos mabasa, no? Ako ito si Judge. Okay. Chu. Inchik mga kababayan, no? Judge Chu. Judge Chue. Okay, spelling na Chu ata ang pronunciation. Okay, ng China, no? Okay, sino pa ito? Si Judge Abraham. France. Okay? Sino ito? Babae, no? Lalaki, tapos babae. Okay, Judge Charles Worth, no? Charles Worth. Hirap naman itong mga pangalan nila, no? Okay, ng anong bansa ito? Australia. Okay, Judge Brand, Brazil. Okay. Judge Norte, Germany. Okay, Judge Bandari. Okay, Bandari. Okay, ng India. Okay, branch ng India po, no? Okay, Judge Robinson. Okay, ng Jamaica. Okay, Judge Muswa. Okay, ng Japan, no? Musawa pala. Judge Musawa ng Japan. Ayan po mga suki, Musawa, no? Okay, Judge, ano ito? Okay. Ako, hindi na mabasa, no? Judge Salam? Saan po? Okay. Lebanon. Judge Salam, Lebanon. Okay. Judge Benunya. Okay, ng Morocco. Benunya, no? Judge Benunya ng Morocco, no? Okay. Judge. Okay. Tamia. Okay, saan ito si Tamia, mga suki? Oh, grabe na maka. Okay, Somalia mga suki, no? Judge Yusuf, dalawang Somalia, no? Okay, Somalia. Okay, Judge Sebutinde ng Uganda, mga suki. So ito mga line up po ng judge maghawak po ng itong Israel War on Gaza, mga suki, no? Okay, yung isang judge ng judge po ng South Africa, okay, nagpalabas po ng kanilang mga finding nila kahapon sa hearing po ng kaso ito, mga suki, no? Okay, so i-monitor natin po itong okay, nangyari po ayan sa South Africa, mga suki, no? Sa itong kaso po ng genocide, pinayag po ng South Africans judge. Okay, dinipendehan naman ng judge po ng Israel, mga suki, no? So kaso, ayan, ibig sabihin po ay kaso ito. Okay, mga suki, mga kabuan, sandali lang. Okay. Sige. Okay, maghanap muna tayo ito. Itong unahin ko na, no? Okay, hello, welcome. Okay, to Islamic Finance to avoid riba, mga suki, no? Pakinggan natin ito, parehas tayo makinig. Sa kanilang natin napaka-importante ito sa atin, no? Okay, sa agama natin Islam, okay, hindi po kumakain ng riba, mga suki, no? Okay, pakinggan natin ito.
Introduce you to my guest for today. He's an Islamic finance banker and an author of the acclaimed book, Heaven's Bankers. Haris Irfan. Welcome to the show, Haris.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure to have you on.
Thanks.
So let's just jump right in. I think the topic that we're talking about today is quite a controversial one amongst our population, which is interested about. So perhaps we can start with what is the significance of riba or interest in Islamic finance?
Riba is very clear for us. Riba means an excess, and there are certain types of commodities which are defined as ribawi, which means that we cannot have an increase of them, and they include things like dates and wheat, and also forms of money like gold and silver. Mm-hmm. So what does it mean to have an excess? It means that if I were to give you £100 I can't ask you to give me back £105 in a day or a year. I can only ask you to give me £100 back, which means that any excess, whether it's £100 or a penny, is riba, and I'm not allowed to charge you that excess.
So you can't charge for time, in a sense.
I can't charge the time value of money. However, there are other ways to make a legitimate profit. So Allah says that trade is halal, but riba is haram, and there are legitimate ways to trade.
Okay, and I mean, interest is quite widespread, and I think we've had ample examples from its continued use in at least the Western financial system of its pros and cons, in a sense. What are the problems that rise from the use of interest?
Well, I think it's been pretty apparent in the last few years during the global financial crisis, the impact that this divergence between what we call the financial economy and the real economy actually does to society. It creates a huge and widening gap between rich and poor.
I mean, for those of us who aren't familiar with those terms, what's the difference? What is a real economy and the financial economy?
Real economy is things that you manufacture, services that you provide.
Right.
So the construction of roads and railways, the provision of services. A hairdresser is in the real economy. An engineer is in the real economy. But the financial economy is something that is related to the real economy and is somewhat more abstract in nature. So as a financier, I can sell you a piece of paper whose return is based on something else. I could sell you a piece of paper, for example, that says, I'll give you £100 if the weather tomorrow is good.
Right.
Right? That's a type of financial instrument, even though it doesn't sound like one. So the more abstract this piece of paper, the less it's rooted in the real economy. And in the Islamic economic model, the financial economy is meant to have a one-to-one correlation with the real economy. So, for example, if a financier, if a borrower or somebody who's looking to raise funds for his business says, I need to raise £100,000, then in theory, the Islamic financier says, okay, I'm going to give you £100,000, but I want to participate in the profits or losses of your business. And that's a real economy transaction. If the financier says, I'll give you £100,000, but I want a 10% interest rate back, that's not participating in his business. That's merely expecting a return for nothing, an excess of money on money.
And that brings charging for time into the equation. So, I mean, on the topic of business, if indeed charging interest is prohibited in Islam, how can an Islamic business, or can it at all, make a profit?
Well, let's take an example. How does a bank make a profit if it's financing home purchases? If you're a conventional bank, let's say the borrower is looking for £100,000 to buy a house.
Yeah.
If you're a conventional bank, you give £100,000 and you take security over the house and you charge the borrower, let's just say 5%. So every year you pay £5,000 in interest payments. Maybe you also repurchase your property over time. So every year you put in another £5,000 and over 20 years, you've bought back the value of the house. Then at the end of 20 years, you own your house outright with no mortgage over it. What does an Islamic bank do? It says, I will buy the house, I will take title to the house, and I will take the risks of that house. Then I will charge you a rent, which economically is equivalent to the interest payments you would have paid had you gone to a conventional bank. And you can also repurchase the house over 20 years and pay me an extra £5,000 until you own the house outright. And that's a halal transaction because the bank has now acted as a merchant and not just a financier who's lending money.
I mean, it makes sense to me, but, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but most of your average consumers or customers are skeptical of this. It just seems like you're changing names.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't just mean Muslims, I mean non-Muslims as well.
Yeah, I can see where the confusion comes in because economically the cash flows look exactly the same. In fact, actually in this country, the Islamic banks are slightly more expensive. But that's more to do with their size and their economies of scale rather than because they're Sharia compliant. So I can understand when a customer says, well, that doesn't look very ethical to me. I'm paying more money and it actually looks the same. The word interest and the word profit have been changed around.
I mean, have they?
No, because the form and the substance is different. We can eat halal meat and it may look, taste, smell the same as non-halal meat. One is halal and one is not. Sometimes the form is important. The same can be applied to Islamic finance transactions. Sometimes it looks the same. Sometimes the cash flows look the same. But actually the substance is different because you do have a set of contracts which are halal, because the financier has taken a certain real economy risk of the asset itself.
I mean, what are the challenges for banks who are offering, say, an Islamic bank is offering this product? What challenges does Islamic finance face in its continued development in prohibiting it in a country that actually encourages it?
You have to have a legal framework that works, that is compatible with Sharia. As it happens in the UK, English law is very compatible with Sharia, despite what other people might have you believe. In fact, there's very little discrepancy. So one can have Sharia principles applied to a commercial transaction and yet be fully within the bounds of English law. So that's a very, very encouraging start, because the UK has fantastic legal precedent, a robust legislative environment, and has specifically created a level playing field for Islamic finance to thrive and prosper in this country.
I mean, sticking to Islamic banks, say a customer buys into all of that, what would put their mind at ease in regards to, because they don't know exactly how the bank makes profit, what's stopping the bank from exploiting that lack of knowledge and exploiting the customer in extension? Because that is a valid concern that a lot of consumers have.
I mean, if you're a customer of an Islamic bank, you will not be transacting with a party that is engaged in activities that are contrary to our faith.
Right.
So that institution will not invest in, for example, companies that manufacture armaments or alcohol or tobacco or things that are harmful to society.
So it's got ethical
principles.
Okay.
And those ethical principles, there's an internal corporate governance, if you like, which is called the Sharia board, which is typically 3 scholars, sometimes more than 3 scholars, who are qualified to opine on commercial and financial transactions within the jurisprudence of commercial transactions in Islamic law, something we call fiqh al-muamalat. And they are experts not only in the fiqh, but also in the financial instruments themselves.
So when you say financial instruments themselves, you mean just Islamic finance? Or are we talking Islamic finance and conventional finance?
Conventional.
Right.
They will know what a zero coupon pre-IPO convertible bond means.
Right, okay.
So these are experts in finance as well as in law, and that's very, very important.
So they understand the context.
Correct, yes. So it's not a case of, going down to your local mosque and asking the imam, can I invest in futures and options?
Right.
The chances are he probably doesn't know.
Yeah.
It's not his fault that he doesn't know. It's a complex and technical instrument.
Right.
So these are individuals who are qualified to opine on these matters, and they're the internal governance of Islamic financial institutions. So when you buy that product, as long as it's got their stamp of approval on it, they've gone through the due diligence of that product to make sure that it's halal.
Harris, let me ask you something. I've got a reliable source. When I spoke to him about this particular aspect, he gave me an example of a bank that contacted him. He's a well-known sheikh, and they contacted him to provide this sort of stamp of approval.
Mm-hmm.
He, of course, wanted all of the papers and all the proofs, etc., so he could take time and look into it.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they offered him a lump sum of money and said, it's all in order, just believe us, and give us a stamp of approval. Now, I'm not saying that necessarily the truth across the board, but as someone who's been in the industry, is that a serious concern?
It is a serious concern
that we should have?
It's a huge concern to me personally. And I'm very concerned that there are too many unscrupulous people in our industry who look to circumvent that process. It's called fatwa shopping, by the way.
Absolutely.
Where they go around looking for the scholar who, for a sum of money, will give them that stamp of approval. I'm pleased to say every scholar that I've met in this industry is of very high integrity. So there will not be the sort of person who will do that without being in full possession of the facts. However, there have been occasions when bankers and other commercial participants in a transaction or a product will withhold information, sweep information under the carpet, hope that the scholars don't notice, otherwise obfuscate, otherwise try and find ways that the transaction will be approved without the scholars really knowing the full picture. And that is a real issue.
I mean, it is very disconcerting.
It is very disconcerting.
On a very basic level, Harris, how does the consumer gain peace of mind? I mean, because they can't turn up to the board and go, show me your qualification. What advice would you give to an average consumer?
The best way for an average consumer to know the answer to this is to go into the branch of whatever Islamic bank they are and say to the person who's selling them the product, do you buy the products that your institution sells? I bet you if you ask that of most of the senior boards
Yeah.
and senior management and boards of the Islamic banks in the UK, you probably get the answer no.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that they're not Sharia compliant. Obviously, if the Sharia board has signed off and they've gone through a very extensive due diligence program.
They say they do. Yeah.
Yeah, but if a customer has those concerns, speak to the people on the ground.
Yeah.
I think you will find, because there's only one Sharia compliant retail institution in this country, that's Al Rayan Bank. I think you'll find that they have a very strong internal governance process and
Okay.
senior management who do strongly believe in the concept.
Okay, very, very interesting. Thank you. It was a hard question, but I'm glad you addressed it head on. Now it's time for a short break, so bear with me. After the break, we'll be continuing on this subject, and the subject, of course, is riba. I'll be asking Harris how the Islamic sector handles it when the conventional finance environment has to tackle these sort of tough questions. All those type of questions and more when we come back. Stay with us. Hello and welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing the significance of riba or interest in Islamic finance and how it is not Sharia compliant and therefore not permitted. To continue the discussion, still with us is Harris Ofan, a leading Islamic finance banker and author. So, Harris, let's get right into benchmarking. It's one of the most contentious issues. People seem to think, a lot of the consumers, average customer, thinks that effectively we are just doing the same thing as interest, but changing the name. Is there any sense of, is it okay to compare the two, like LIBOR, for example?
Absolutely. I mean, if we don't know how to price our products, then how will we price them fairly? If we don't know what our competitors are pricing them at, then we may charge too much or too little. If we charge too much, we're not being fair on our customers. If we charge too little, we may not have a viable business. So we have to use other benchmarks around us to know what to charge our customers.
And do we have to use LIBOR, like the interest-based ones?
No, we can create our own index. We can call it the Islamic Interbank Offered Rate instead of the London Interbank Offered Rate, LIBOR. But because our industry doesn't have the economies of scale yet to create its own benchmark, for now we're relying on this work in progress.
Right.
We're using somebody else's benchmark.
So that doesn't exist yet, the one that you just mentioned?
It's being worked on over many years and it will take time, and one day we'll have the economies of scale.
One day. So let's put a timeline on one day. From your experience or from the time you spent in the financial industry, what do you think? How far along are we there? And perhaps you could elucidate some of the challenges that we're facing on getting to that, because it seems like that's quite a key point.
I think we've only scratched the surface of Islamic finance today. It's a $2 trillion industry. When you look at the ethical finance industry, not Islamic, what we call ESG, environmental and social and governance principles, that's a $58 trillion industry, right? It's 30 times as big as Islamic finance.
Right.
And yet we represent a quarter of the world's population. So what are we doing wrong? Why haven't we scratched the surface of Islamic finance? I think it's because we haven't connected well with our end customer. And we're only starting to do that now. So when we talk about having our own Islamic interbank offered rate, that's one step. But I think, more fundamentally, we're not connecting with our customers. We're not convincing them that what we do is halal and tayyib, not just compliant, but also wholesome.
Yeah. I mean, the index that you mentioned, does it exist? I mean, is it just a theoretical idea, this, or does it actually exist somewhere else in the globe and it has been successful?
Well, LIBOR is also a theoretical idea. It's a concept, it's a benchmark, it's a mathematical construct.
But I mean the index, so we're a certain time away, let's say, from the Islamic index that we want to create. Does that exist anywhere else in any other economy around the globe?
Well, I think we're fairly unique in wanting to have a parallel system, right? And the question is, do we aim to have a parallel system, or do we aim to work within the existing system? So some governments around the world, such as Malaysia, have created a separate set of legislation, a separate framework for Islamic finance.
Yes.
Others, such as the UK, have allowed Islamic finance to coexist within the existing ecosystem of financial services.
Yeah. I mean, Malaysia, you mentioned, there's Bahrain as well, there's Oman. So it's not like Malaysia is always held as this, the pioneer Islamic finance, really moving the way forward. And they have a dual system. Now, it's clearly been very effective in their economies. One, is it realistic that we're going to get it anytime soon? And two, can it, in long term, exist in parallel with the UK system that exists?
When you say, are we going to get it, I presume you're talking about the UK. I don't think the UK is going to get a parallel system. No,
you don't.
Because the Bank of England has been very clear on this subject, that Islamic finance is something they want to attract, they want to allow to flourish within the UK environment, but they're not going to create special rules for Islamic finance. They're going to level the playing field so that Islamic finance, and they have done, so that Islamic finance can issue products and make investments on a Sharia compliant basis without being negatively impacted. So they want everybody to achieve the same level.
I see.
But what they're not going to do is create a separate set of regulations and legislative framework and so on.
I mean, that's definitely one of the challenges. One of the other challenges that you mentioned was that consumers, I mean, the uptake isn't where it needs to be, even though the population is quite large. Now, a lot of critics have this criticism of Islamic finance that it's just not as cost effective as the alternative non-Islamic products. What do you have to say about that?
I say that's nonsense because the data proves otherwise. If you look at what's happened before and after the global financial crisis, you see that Islamic funds, Islamic financial institutions have generally, relatively speaking, done better. So, for example, if you were in
a lack of riba.
A lack of riba. Yeah. If you were in a conventional fund prior to the financial crisis in 07, 08, then you would probably have been invested in highly leveraged stocks, in financial services companies. You would have lost a lot of money.
People did.
And they did. Yeah. If you were in a Sharia compliant fund, you probably still would have lost money, no doubt. We went through a very grave economic recession, but it wouldn't have been as much as the conventional benchmarks.
Why?
Because you wouldn't have been exposed to toxic derivatives. You wouldn't have been exposed to highly leveraged companies with lots of interest-bearing debt on their balance sheet. You wouldn't have been exposed to financial services companies who experienced a huge downturn during the global financial crisis. For those reasons, you would have been relatively more protected, slightly more defensive in strategy.
I mean, it's an incredible argument with an even more incredible example of what happens when you don't sort of pay attention to that. So with that in mind as a piece of evidence, why is it that the uptake hasn't?
Because human beings are short-termists. They think to the next quarter, to the next year.
Right.
They hear someone say, I can get you 20% return on this real estate. And they go for that. They don't think, you know what, I would be happy in my life if I went 20 years just earning 7% return. That would be a great pension return, by the way.
Yeah.
But human beings don't think like that. They think, can I make 100% next year on my investment? And that's what they want to do. So I think that's been one of the reasons is that they don't look at the long-term effect of what a robust Islamic economic model can do for them.
Yeah.
Instead, they think, well, you know, what am I paying right now and what am I earning right now?
And I mean, the counter-argument is that there has been an increase in ethical finance. After the economic downturn, people and the bankers scandal, people realized that there are some serious things that need to be addressed. What's the difference between ethical finance and traditional Islamic finance? I mean, the hallmark of Islamic finance, or one of them, is the lack of use of interest. Is that also present in ethical finance? And if it isn't, it is present in Islamic.
Typically speaking, if you are invested in an ethical non-Islamic fund, then you might be invested in banks. But banks which have, very leading policies on corporate social responsibility and other ethical concepts. But those banks would still be earning riba and paying riba and invested in a global economic system which is tainted with riba. So for a Muslim to invest in an ethical fund, they'd have to be comfortable with the idea of investing in a fund that's not necessarily Sharia compliant. So there is a difference between the two. However, I think there's a strong overlap between the two. So if you had an Islamic fund which also applied what I call ESG principles, these are the principles that sign up to the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment. So policies on environmental policies, labor practices, corporate social responsibility, all of these kind of things that make a good company, a tayyib, wholesome company, not just a halal company. Now, if you overlaid that on top of Sharia compliance, imagine what a fantastic fund that would be. There's evidence to suggest that millennials, for example, are very interested in that kind of product. But at the moment, they don't have the buying power. It's only guys like me who have that buying power. It's my generation. So I think as the new generation comes up, that's going to become much more important to Islamic finance.
I mean, a lot of commentators are saying one of the challenges those millennials will face, because they still live in a very, especially if you live in London, it's not exactly cheap. So competitiveness and living on a budget is always the forefront of most people's minds. So Islamic finance, will it always have this disadvantage working against it, that it isn't as competitive as other traditional products?
I don't think so. I think just
because essentially it doesn't charge riba, isn't it? That's the key factor.
But just like the halal meat industry, I think when My father arrived in this country in 1960. There wasn't a halal meat industry. And to get halal meat, you have to slaughter your own animal, right? That's a very inefficient process and low economies of scale.
Right.
But as more and more Muslims arrived, and you created halal butchers, and now even supermarkets sell halal meat,
Yeah.
it's now such a huge industry that the costs are relatively cheap. And the same thing can happen to the Islamic finance industry.
I mean, it's had. I mean, Harris, I understand that example, but wouldn't you agree that? I mean, the butchering aspect, the meat, there was a significant timeline. There was an eventual uptake, and then it has flourished like it has.
Yeah.
Like you said, you can buy meat at Asda or something like that. But Islamic finance isn't brand new. It's been around for a long time.
Yes.
So. Is that really? I mean, is more time really the solution?
I think that's a really important point, actually. I think there's also an education factor here. You know, time is the solution, economies of scale are the solution, but in order to attract customers, I think we need to move away from this idea that riba, that interest, is normalized in our communities. You know, if you go to dinner parties amongst, British Pakistanis, for example, you'll hear mothers say, very proudly, "MashaAllah, my son is a banker." MashaAllah, how is that even possible? They're engaged in an industry that promotes riba. So I think we've normalized it as a society, as a community. We've normalized interest-based financial products, and I think we need to move away from that.
It's been so fascinating. I could go on and on and on, but unfortunately, we've come to the end of the show. Sadly, we've run out of time, but thank you for your insight on riba, Harris. It's been a really good discussion, rather. As mentioned previously, throughout this series, we'll be exploring the basics of Islamic finance, and as the series progresses, we'll be tackling areas such as Islamic banking and mortgages. So stick with us for all of that. Also, if you have any questions or issues you want discussed on the program, please tweet us at Islam Channel, or alternatively contact us via Facebook on islamchannel.tv with the hashtag The Islamic Finance Show. And of course, we'll do our best to address them right here on the show. Next week, we discuss the significance and the role of Sharia compliance in Islamic finance. My thanks again to Harris Afan for being with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And to you, of course, for watching at home. Until next time, take care and goodbye.
Okay, Islamic finance, Islamic banking, discuss po ni Mr. Irfan, no? Okay, so parehas tayo makinig. Okay, para maka-avoid tayo ng riba, mga suki, no? Hindi po pwede sa atin ang riba, mga kababayan, no? Okay. Hindi talaga pwede. So, yan po ang lecture po ni Mr. Irfan, no? Okay, dating sa bangko ng mahabang panahon hanggang mag-retire po, mga suki, mga kababayan, no? Ayan. Okay, tayo mga maniwala sa agama Islam, master po natin ng mga Islamic finance, Islamic economy, okay, Islamic banking, okay, para hindi tayo makasagasa po, para hindi tayo may pakain po sa pamilya natin, mga riba, mga suki, no? Okay, so tayo ay mag-avoid po diyan po, mga suki, no? Okay, itong maliit na negosyo ko ay pangarap ko ay Islamic compliance, mga suki, no? Okay, Sharia compliance, kahit maliit mo, mga suki, no? Okay, kung meron ba tulong sa akin, no? Para maging digital ito, okay, yan po ang pangarap ng news natin ay dapat compliance ang mga maniwala sa agama Islam, okay, sa Sharia law, mga kababayan, no? Okay, nga, umasenso ka. Okay? Umasenso ang mga negosyo, mayaman ka. Pag galing naman sa riba, mga suki, okay, masakit din, mga okay? Hindi rin katanggap-tanggap, no? Kaya sinasabi ko rito po sa Barm Region, kahit mga probinsya, no? Provincial government, Okay, municipal government, city government, ilan lang ang city government? Okay, tayo ay mag-comply po sa free from riba mga suki, no? Okay, may mga pondo naman dyan sa 20%. Bakit hindi natin gawa ng batas? Okay, gawa natin ng batas kasi may autonomiya naman tayo. Okay, sa base po sa tradition natin, no? Okay, na magbigay tayo tulong o may financial tulong po sa mga negosyo o sa mga yung tinatawag public finance, no? Okay, free. Okay, ng pamriba, no? Ang city government of Isabela, meron nata silang ang Lepido. Okay, meron silang para sa mga Muslim po diyan sa Isabela City. Okay, magkuha ng pondo, tulong sa local government ng Basilan, Isabela City. Wala po, free of interest mga suki, na? Okay, yun ang maganda. Tulad ng Maluso, itong si Hanswood. Bakit siya hindi magpasa po ng resolution? Tulungan niya yung constituent niya. Okay, para wala na po riba mga suki, na? Free from riba. Public funds, kukunin po sa pondo ng local government unit, galing sa 20%, para matulungan niya ang mga negosyante po, mga small business, o yung tinatawag na SME, okay, diyan po sa Maluso, no? Napaka saya kan, luhaya ba? Wala tayong katakot-takot, luhaya tayo. Okay, kumakain po ng free from riba mga suki, no? Okay, free from corruption. Okay? Wala na. Yun sana ang mga pangarap po ng itong sa BARM mga suki, no? Yung sakop ng BARM government. Okay, gumawa ng batas po para ayos po ang kabuhayan po ng mga minority. Naniwala po sa agama Islam, no? Paano ka asenso? Puro riba na lang kinakain natin, no? Okay, walang barka ang buhay natin kasi puro riba na. Okay, ang ay kinakain natin araw-araw mga suki, no? Ayan. Okay. Yung mga example po, maglagay ka ng pera, no? Okay, sa mga bodega. Yun mga practice natin noon. Magbigay ka ng 10,000 ay tumubo at saka hindi tumubo mga suki, no? Ang mga bodega. Kunin po rin ang yung 10% mga suki, no? Yun ang kondisyon. Yun ang kasulatan. Ang tubo mo sa 10,000 mo, kumita at saka hindi kumita po ng bodega, halimbawa bodega ng rubber, bodega ng nyug, kukunin po nilang 10%. Yun po ang riba mga suki, no? Pero kung maglagay ka ng pera mo, okay, pag lugi ka naman, pag tumubo ay meron kang profit mga suki. Okay yon. Pero kung gano'n ang kondisyon, maglagay ka ng 10,000 mo, okay, kumita, hindi kumita, yung interest mo 10% ay kunin mo sa negosyante. Iyon po ang definition po ng riba. Maraming definition, for example lang yon. Okay, yon po mga practice. Kahit yan sa Basilan, no? Ganon po, maglagay ng pera sa mga bodega, yung may mga pera, and ganon po ang kondisyon, no? Dapat ang kondisyon, pag lugi ka rin. Halimbawa, ako ay maglagay ng 10,000. Pag lugi po ang bodega, lugi ka rin. Pag tumubo ang bodega, kasama ka sa profit mga suki mga bayan, no? Okay, ikwenta, okay, ang gross profit, and then minus ang expenses, okay, ang natira net profit, okay, yan po paghatian yung mga suki mga kababayan, no? Okay. So, yon po dapat ipapractice natin, no? Para hindi tayo kumain ng riba mga suki, no? Okay, may dalawang negosyo ako. Okay, free of riba mga suki ang negosyo natin, no? Okay. Maraming mag-alok na mga mangutang ng ganon-ganon. Pero hindi po tinatanggap po ng ating kumpanya. Okay, kung meron po ay ang kapalit ay may riba mga suki, no? Okay, hayaan mo na mag-close ang tindahan. Halimbawa, huwag ka lang po ay magtanggap ng riba mga suki, no? So, yon po, ina-avoid natin. Kaya sabi ko, okay, negosyo natin ay dapat ay Sharia compliance mga suki, no? Okay, kabagal po ng farm government hanggang ngayon, 5 taon na, hindi pa rin makabuo po ng itong okay, free from riba ang farm government, no? Katagal na. Okay, naturete na ata yung mga opisyal ng farm kasi maraming black run, hindi na naalala po kung riba ba o free from riba mga suki. No, naturete na. Okay, dahil sa dami po ng pera ng farm mga suki, no? Yung priority sa atin, sa agama natin, okay, hindi po nagawa mga suki, no? Ayan, hindi po nagawa. So, ayan po mga suki, mga kababayan, ang problema, no? Okay, mga probinsya natin, mga munisipyo natin, mga barangay, puro magriba mga suki, no? Hindi na natin i-cover pa. Okay? Can you imagine ang halimbawa LGU? Okay, pinipinance po ng mga financer. Okay? Kunin ang Iraq, kunin ang Cheque, and then may yung financer po mga kababayan ay may interest. Hawakan niya halimbawa pondo, hindi na ako magbanggit ng mga munisipyo, pero alam ko mga suki, no? Okay, kahit hindi na sabihin sa akin, alam ko ang kalakaran. Ako financer, malaking pera ko. Ipipinance ko ang munisipyo yan, pamagitan po ng interest. Ayan. Yan po kahit sa basilan, no? Yan po ang practice ng uso mga suki, mga kababayan, no? Ipinance ko yung munisipyo mo, bigyan kita ng ganito, pero kumuha ako ng interest. Buwan-buwan po mga suki, ganun halaga, no? So yan. Kahit hindi yung sabihin sa akin, alam ko mga suki, no? Okay, kahapon may mag-explain din sa akin. Okay, taga-basilan, ganun po ang kalakaran mga suki, no? Ayan. So ano yun? Okay, mag-pondo ka sa halimbawa mga 2 million o 3 million ang pondo ng lokal, mga munisipyo, buwan-buwan. So kukuha ng 10%. Magkano yung 10% yan sa 3 million? Jackpot. Okay? Kukuha ng buwan-buwan, may cheque na, pero i-maintain po ng mapera. Okay, ng mapera ng isang financer, kaya mag-finance po sa mga munisipyo, kaya mag-finance sa barangay, magbenta ng cheque. Ayan mga suki, mga kababayan. Tapos may patong na 10% mga kababayan. Hindi pa, mga ilang percent pa yan mga suki, no? Iyon po ang kwento sa akin po ng isang taga-basilan mga suki, no? Okay. Matagal kami magkwentuhan kahapon habang magkakape. So yan po ang practice. Ay forever practice po sa basilan mga suki, na? Ayan. So, paano ka maka-develop? Kung nakuha na po ang interest, okay, ng mga financial mga suki, no? Yan ang hindi katanggap-tanggap mga suki, no? Okay, dapat itong si Attorney Elijah Dumama Alba mag-regulate po, okay, sa BAM government, no? I-address natin. Okay, dapat hindi po pwede kanyan, no? Okay. Minister po ng MILG itong si Elijah Dumama Alba, no? Okay, yung practice na ganyan pagkalagyan ng pera mga opisyal natin, and then may patong po 10%, no? Ayan. So, dapat iayos yan. Kung gusto natin ay maging malaya tayo sa riba, no? Okay, address natin, okay, sa lahat ng local government po ng kahit pa malaking kita na, dapat i-erase yan mga suki, no? Kahit kumita ka na ng yung mga financial, kumita ng husto dapat to ay tanggalin po mga suki, no? Okay, kaya nga dapat i-practice natin, okay, ang Sharia compliance, Islamic finance, Islamic economy, okay, Islamic development sa ating kahit lang dito sa BAM region mga suki, no? Isot na yun para sa akin, ayos na. Ayan. Okay, kaya ako kahit mahirap pa, okay, ang mga kailangan ko kapital, talagang hindi ako pumasok ng ganyan mga suki. Basta riba. Okay. Baka kain ko sa mga apo ko, mga magandang lalaki mga apo ko. Okay. And then, magandang mga dalaga ang mga apo ko, and then pakain ko ng riba. Huwag na lang po mga suki, na. Bahala na hindi ako mayaman. Ayan. So, riba avoidance po ang pulisya natin mga suki, na. Okay. So, meron mga negosyo-negosyo ay napundar na ngayon basta Sharia compliance mga suki, na. Okay, hindi po magriba. Ayan. Promise. Ayan po mga suki, na. Okay. Kaya nga sabi ko hindi metal-metal si Abdul Jaman Damahan, no? Please lang, yung magsabi ng metal-metal, i-erase niya yon sa kanyang kaisipan. Hindi po metal-metal si Abdul Jaman Damahan. Okay. Mag-aral. Magbasa po ay si Abdul Jaman Damahan. Hindi nga magtulog sa gabi. Okay. Puro basa lang ng basa po mga suki, mga kababayan, no? Ayan. Para hindi masayang ang oras. Hindi nga ako gaano magtulog sa gabi. Ayan. Okay, kalbo na nga tayo na wala ng buhok sa mga kakababasa mga suki, no? Ayan. Okay. Sa malawak po kaalaman natin sa pamamagitan ng pagbasa mga suki, no? Okay. Okay, hindi tayo against sa mga yung mga commercial banking, no? Kasi sa kanila yun, na concept ng sinasabi ko na okay, yung concept po ng mga ayan, concept po ng yung Zionist. Okay, yung pagbangko nila pag gawa ng mga interest rate na yan. Okay. Zionist sa buong mundo ang gumawa ng mga ganyan, no? Okay, kaya tayo ang Muslim, Islam, dapat po palakasin po natin. Our economy should be strong, okay, for the Muslim population, mga suki. 1.8 billion Muslim population, okay, dapat our economy should be based, our finance should be based, our banking system should be based on Sharia compliance, mga suki, no? Okay, hayaan mo na yung sa mga Western concept of economy, sa kanila yon. Nabubuhay sila ng ganun po mga suki, wala tayong pakialam doon. Basta tayo, okay, ang maniwala sa agama natin, iwasan natin mga ganun po mga suki, na? Okay, hindi tayo, okay, dapat tayo free from riba. No? Wala na akong oras, overtime na. Okay, sobra-sobra na. Okay, ito po mga suki, no? Ayan. Ayan. Okay, katagal ko mag-cover po dyan sa area po ng Central Mindanao. Ayan. Meron po mga grupo yan, Hayatul Ulama, no? Okay, puro grupo po ng mga matitinik po sa pag-aral ng pagturo, pagturo, and then educate po sa mga minority. Dapat bigyan sila ng role, no? Okay, para sa mga Sharia compliance. Hayatul Ulama. Ilang beses ko na-cover yan po. Okay, nung mag-cover ako dyan, no? Okay, kabigat ng mga utak nila yan, mga suki. Itong Hayatul Ulama, no? Hayatul Ulama. Okay, dapat po may role. Okay, sa pamahalaan po ng mga advisory council, advisory committee, okay, sa pamahalaan ng BARM, no? Okay, grabe, puro mugsunog ng kilay yan ng mga ulama yan to. Matagal mag-aral sa mga ibang bansa. And then, parang walang kwenta lang mga suki, no? Pag walang kwenta. Okay, kung ako nga chief minister po ng BAM, okay, talagang tulungan ko yung mga iyang grupo na yan, no? Ayan. Hayatul Ulama. Okay, association natin yan mga suki, no? Okay, matagal ko na cover. Pag mag-cover ako dyan po sa kanila. Okay, napaka mga gagaling po mga suki, no? Okay. Pag magsalita sa podium, grabe. Ayan. So, dapat may role, no? Okay, itong Bangsamoro government. Ayan. Huwag kalimutan sila mga suki, no? Okay, meron na nga speech. Itong si Ustad Abdul Karim Miswari, no? Okay, dapat ulama sa community ay bigyan po ng role sa kanyang privilege speech po dyan po sa BTA BARM, no? Okay, hindi lang parang ordinary citizen po ang mga grupo yan. Dapat po sila bigyan ng okay, pagturo, kapangyarihan po pagturo sa atin mga suki, no? Okay. Yan po. Na-touch ako doon sa sinasabi po ni Ustad Abdul Karim Miswari sa kanyang privilege speech po dyan sa BTA BARM. Okay. Maikli lang ang ano niya, no? Maikli lang ang sinabi niya, pero yung pinakapuntos, pinakapabuod ng kanyang privilege speech na dapat ang ulama po bigyan ng okay, bigyan ng role sa kabuhayan natin, no? Bilang minority. Okay. Okay, nakapatugtog na ako, hindi magpaalam na lang mga suki, no? Okay. Dito po sa programa Consolidated News natin International. Okay, ADLSNTV International. Iyan po ang maibigay ko sa inyo araw ng Friday. Sabi po ng anak ko, magbasa ka ng Quran. Okay, sabi ko, tinatopic ko. Okay, ang tinatopic ko tungkol po sa riba. Islamic finance, Islamic banking, Islamic economy, mga kababayan, no? Okay, ganun din. Ganun din ang kapantay yon. Magbasa ko ng Quran and then magtopic ako ng about ganito. Okay, ganun din ang timbang na yon. Okay, sa pahala mga kababayan. Sa reward, galing po sa Panginoon Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, no? Ganun din ang equate nyon. Kasi tungkol po sa riba ang tinatopic natin, no? Ayan, paano? Tapos na ang balita. Ayan po mga suki, mga kababayan natin, na. Okay, ito po ang parinig natin and then mag-close tayo ng programa. Babalik tayo mga hapon, no? Ayan. Okay, kahit dito po sa Zamboanga City, no? City Council, at saka City Government dapat gumawa sila ganun. Meron mga Muslim, okay, Muslim po ng konsel natin, si Jihan Eding, no? At saka Nunyo. Ayan. Dapat mag-propose sila, okay, para sa mga minority dito po sa Zamboanga City, no? Na magkaroon po ng compliance, Sharia compliance, no? Hindi nang bawas sa konstitusyon natin. Kasama tayo po sa lipunan ng 110 million Filipinos, no? Okay. Bakit na hindi magawa nila Attorney Jihan Eding at saka itong Sinunyo mga suki, no? Okay. Mga Muslim sila. Ituturing natin mga Muslim po mga suki, ang mga konsehala na yan. Batas. Okay, para tulong po sa mga minority, maraming minority dito sa Zamboanga, may karapatan tayo mga suki, no? Batas na karapatan. Ayan. Pagdating po sa agama natin mga suki, no? May karapatan tayo. Ayan. Pwede silang gumawa ng batas. Ayan. Huwag lang tayo labag sa konstitusyon natin, no? Pero kung batas naman, okay, kailangan natin, bakit tayo hindi gumawa ng batas, no? Ayan. It's a challenge natin sila. Okay. Okay, paalam na. Hindi matapos-tapos. Nakakonsume ako ng 1 oras, 17 minutos, at sa ilang segundo, no? Okay, at saka 39 segundo mga suki, mga kababayan. Bye-bye na. Okay, hindi pa ako nakapaalam, no? Okay, dito po sa programa, Consolidated News. Okay, tinutulungan po ng Mind of Global Food Lines. Okay, sa programa Halo-Halo Special, Opinion, Balita at iba pa. Okay, kasama po sa Biso Publiko, Tinig ng Mamamayan. Ayan, Tinig ng Mamamayan. Ayan po. Okay, at sa sumbungan ng mamamayan. Okay, buenos dias con todos, no? De 98 barangays de Zamboanga mga suki, no? Buenos dias, mga kompoblanos aquí na Zamboanga, no? Okay. Di ba tama ako? Tama po mga suki, no? Okay, baka maayos ng problema sa Gaza Strip, parang magkaroon ng impasse sa pamagitan po ng okay, CNN reporter. Okay, nakakontak po ng okay, kay Basem, maghawak po ng hostages yan po sa Gaza Strip at saka Gaza City mga kababayan, na. So I'm repeating, okay, advice Basem Naim, okay, to replace his gadget, no? Mahirap na po mapuntir yan, andoon ang lugar mo, and then pasabukan ka ng bomba, todo po ay wala ka na. Doon po ganun ka-effective po ang mga gadget, mga smart ginagamit natin ito. Okay? Makita ka hanggang kubeta mga suki, no? Ayan. Kahit saan ka magtago, matrace ka. Okay, sa Google Map Locator mga suki, no? Ayan. Mahirap po. Okay, mahirap po ang kung meron kang ginagawa na hindi tama sa lipunan, trace na trace ka mga suki, no? Ayan. Sige na, bye-bye na.